I'm Mel,
And I'm Andrea.
and we've been asking ourselves, WTF? Where's the fun?
So, welcome to our podcast for heart-led business leaders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs ready for more. More impact, more wealth, more joy, and more magic, all while having even more fun than ever before.
As co-founders of FunX, we believe that life and business is way more fulfilling when you're following the fun.
So we're flipping the script on success, giving you permission to create from a whole new paradigm where you can have a lasting impact while nurturing your well-being and having a freaking blast along the way.
So join us each week for engaging solo episodes
and real conversations with experts who are embodying this new paradigm of leadership, spiritual wealth, business growth, and of course, fun.
If you're ready to reignite your spark, make bold moves, and lead from a whole new energy,
let's jump in and have some fun.
We just recorded a podcast with the one and only Kate Rogers.
You are going to love Kate. Kate is a self-taught abstract artist who's on a mission to bring more color into your life and into your home. She embodies bold expression and unapologetic energy to celebrate curiosity, play, and just permission to say yes to life.
And this episode was so good. Some of the highlights for me was talking about when she spoke on stage recently. And honestly, all the times that she's been putting herself in situations that force her to grow.
Yes, as an artist, we talk more about expression, about the importance of your space, key transformations that can be really simple, but really enhance your energy. So you're not going to want to miss this episode.
Hey, welcome back to WTF. Where's the fun? I'm Mel.
And I'm Andrea.
And today we have Kate Rogers. Yes.
Kate, welcome. We're so grateful to have you. I feel like we've been blessed to have you in our world and get to kind of do life together for, I don't even know how many years now.
A couple of years now.
Yeah, so we're excited to jump in.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. We exchange Instagram voice notes all the time, and now it's like we're just bringing it into a longer conversation.
You are honestly probably one of my favorite people to co-create with. I think that is one of your superpowers for sure. And even before we started recording, we were starting, I feel like we started the conversation like we need to stop talking because I feel like this is magical.
I know.
And if we were to even just jump in and like kick off from where we were talking before, it was around, I was sharing with you how a lot of our listeners like really do love what they do. And at the same time, they're often in this space where they're also like, yeah, what's next? Or I do have a desire for more. And they're not necessarily sure what that next step even might be. And then kind of your take on it.
Yeah, well, and that's so relatable to me because I spent like most of my life growing up, I was like a very energetic, playful kid, and I lost that as I let the desires and norms of other people kind of mold what I eventually learned to accept and I followed. And so when I got to the point of having my first full-time job outside of university, I was like, okay, like I've done what I'm supposed to do and I don't love it. So what now? And I caught myself like daily dreaming about retirement. Just in the workforce. Like it I, if I'm thinking about 30, 40 years from now, like starting my life and wishing and wanting for that point of my life, like I'm not gonna make it. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna make it to that age.
I think a lot of people relate to that.
Yeah. And what I've learned is that place typically comes as a result from not honoring what we desire as the individual. And it's almost like we need to relearn how to honor it and how to even admit it to ourselves. And so I'm a person who is very much of action. And so I don't settle for circumstances that don't sit right with me for very long. The longest I'll sit in it is like if I don't truly know what to do. But as soon as I have an idea, I'm not hemming and hawing about whether or not that's the right thing. I'm just like, get me out of here. I'm gonna try anything. And that's kind of what started getting me out of it 1 year into the workforce where I was situationally depressed, and travel had always held a really special place in my heart. It's where I felt the most free and alive exploring the world and discovering myself, and so I found a flight deal, to Portugal, and I booked it, and it was kind of crazy because I'm like, "I'm going to a foreign country where I know nobody, I don't know the language, I am not in a good place, like, who does this?" But I just, like, I needed something different, and that trip, and specifically one day on that trip where I went on a long walk, 21 kilometers in the middle of nowhere, was life-changing for me,
Wow.
and I think it's when you're able to admit what's true for you and you quiet all of the noise and distraction of your day to day. So even if you're loving your life and you're loving the business that you've created, but you're caught up in those day to day responsibilities, you don't necessarily have the time to allow what's simmering below the surface to really come to light and come into your full consciousness. And taking that quiet time away and scheduling it and being open to what comes up and being interested in welcoming the truth that comes up, whatever that truth is, that's the first step to knowing, okay, what might be next. You can percolate on that.
It's so cool. I love this, and it reminds me of, and I'm gonna butcher the quote or whatever the essence of what I'm gonna say next, but it was kinda similar. It was like, I read this recently. It's like truth, like, and I'm talking like heart truth, like your truth. It's it's gonna it's not really, it's still the truth, whether you can sink it in, whether you can how well you can, I guess, I maybe even honor it. That doesn't really matter. It's still gonna be the truth in your heart, and I think a lot of us, it can take some time for us to actually honor that and listen to that, and even, yeah, trust that what's coming in our heart is actually for our highest and greatest good, because often when it does come through, it's usually calling us out of our comfort zone, or it's calling us out of the shoulds in which we thought we should be doing. So what was it that came up on that trip for you? I'm gonna ask. What was the when you quieted yourself, what came through?
On this hike.
Yeah, it was like I was reliving my childhood as an adult. And there was nobody else around, like, it was just the most expansive surroundings. There's very few places you can go in this world that are relatively accessible to access or to get to and not have another soul in sight. But for 21 kilometers, I'm walking this rugged coastline and there's nobody. And it felt like the world was mine. And I got to go at the pace that I wanted, which ended up being really slow because I was just so taken and captivated by the scenery. I'm like, how is this real life? Like, I just want to take it in. I never want to forget it. And that was the first kind of I have this term I use called heart sparks, and it's to me, it's this feeling that is really hard to put words to, but it's just this overwhelming excitement and fullness in your heart that lights you up, and it's those moments that I really encourage people to hold on to, and so I'm getting all of these heart sparks, this surge of happiness and fulfillment and awe running through my whole body at this scenery, and I just got to go slow and I got to inspect really closely really cool flowers, and nobody was with me telling me, "We gotta make it by this time," or "I wanna rest," and with no distractions, I was just walking in a very methodical way. My mind was clear, and so I wasn't actively thinking about anything, but then just thoughts would naturally come up that were sparked by the clearness that my mind had in that moment.
Mhm. It's so funny because it reminds me of what you're saying is, like, basically you're getting downloads, right?
Yeah.
In those moments. And for us, we go out into the woods and hike for like hours. And that is when I get my best downloads for sure.
And we intentionally go where nobody else.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the truth doesn't wanna be found if you're looking for it. It wants you to just it hangs out on the peripheral.
Yes.
Today's episode of WTF Where's the Fun is sponsored by The Fun Experience, a curated mastermind for established business owners, entrepreneurs, and CEOs ready for more. More magic, more joy, more wealth, and more fun than ever before. So if you're ready for a peer-to-peer mastermind that's helping you to embody more leadership, more impact, and make bold moves, The Fun Experience is where it's at.
Yeah. And I think it also hangs out when you're also enjoying the moment because
Mhm.
I think that's part of it. If you are clinging to it too much, it's like you're still a little bit in your head or your ego or still a little bit of the forcing energy. But I really do think when you shift your energy, especially moving, like there's something about physically moving your body, being in a space of nature or beauty. For us, it's trees, but it's also water. Like anytime we're around that,
And it's
um,
back to, I think it's Dana St. Clair who says, when you drift, shift.
Ooh, I love
And,
that.
and that usually we know when we need to have a hike, a long hike. It's usually when we're in our heads and we're drifting. We know we need to shift, so we shift the energy by going in the woods.
so
Yeah, like coming back to center.
yeah. And so what you're sharing actually makes so much sense. And it's like we don't typically, well, we don't necessarily have to go halfway across the world to go to Europe, although I highly recommend.
Highly recommend.
So
And just taking some space to actually slow down and step away from
Mm,
the environment in which you're in. And I think this is one of your superpowers
yes.
is having an inspiring environment around you and actually enhancing your environment so that it starts to become supportive
Yeah.
of not only your current growth, but also where you're going, like as an artist, as so many different things.
yeah, and it's an important and very subtle distinction, I think, when you're in those moments of needing to shift your energy, it's usually because you're well, sorry. You need to shift your energy because you're not happy with something, like, you're not loving what you have, and that typically is a result of longing and discontent. And the energy shift comes, and it's also a mindset shift where instead of focusing on what you have, but what you don't want about what you have, you need to shift to what do I want? What can I change? And oftentimes, and I include myself in this, people don't know what they want. They just know it's not what they have. And that's enough information for them to provide a starting point. So, whether it's in life, in business, in your physical environment of your home or office space, it's like, so let's use the home environment as an example. If you walk in your front door every day or you go into your living room and it's just like, I don't like this space. I despise the dark mushroom walls or this couch is lumpy or I've never liked something about the room, it can be so easy to fall into the trap of getting hung up on that. But when you recognize you don't like something, you have the power to change it. And that's your opportunity to recognize, okay, what am I going to do about it? You cannot do anything, but then the longing and discontent stays.
Yeah.
Yes. We had this was when I first started my studying coaching. This was probably back in 2000, maybe 16, 17. I had one of my mentors. Coach Dave, he was all about like games, which I loved. I'm like playing games. But for him, he was always so big. He used to be a coach for like professional soccer, and he kind of brought that similar vibe into the personal coaching realm. And he would talk so much about the environment is mostly like your current environment is a reflection of who you were, not even who you are or who you're becoming. So he was always such a big proponent of change your environment. But one of the simple things is zapping the tolerations,
Yeah.
which sounds like what you're saying. It's like that disconnect or discontent, but it's like it could be as simple as what's a toleration? Like I can tell you a toleration that we have right now
No.
is our office chair. It drives me absolutely bonkers. And
Yes.
and we come into our office space and Mel painted the walls and it brings us so much joy. It's like how fun. And then I see my office chair and I'm like, this thing is driving me nuts.
It's going in the garbage.
So it actually becomes an energy zap
Yeah.
Yeah.
and your energy is now going towards those things. So I totally agree with you. It's like when your environment is harmonious, it's inspiring, it brings you sparks of joy. That energy is now, instead of it being zapped, it's actually going to be the opposite. It's going to start to become I don't know, I guess what's zapped, like energy magnetizer.
Yeah, you're freeing up energy to be redirected elsewhere. And I love what you said about spaces often reflecting who you were, not who you are or who you want to become, because that is such the core principle of what I do in space design, home design. It is updating this outdated space that does not reflect you and maybe never did, and thinking about what are your desires? What do you want for yourself? It can be tangible, like I really want to have enough money to vacation in Belize every year during the winter, or it can be a lot more abstract and intangible, like I just want to know that I have enough freedom to kind of choose what I do with my day.
Yeah.
And so it's about really identifying, well, what do those feelings truly feel like? What are things that represent them in a physical object? It could be a color, it could be a shape, it could be a piece of art that just invokes that feeling. And it is about basically physically manifesting this bigger desire and infusing it into your space where you get to be reminded of it and live in that energy where you're spending most of your time. So you can just stay grounded and focused and inspired by moving forward, whatever that journey ends up becoming.
Yeah. It almost becomes like the anchor for
Yes.
the thing that you're manifesting.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And I find some people, they get hung up on, like, there's this interesting aversion to commitment, and it can be aversion to financial commitment, but more often than not, I think it's just not being confident that what they think they want now is still going to be what they want later. And so they would rather, they're more comfortable. I don't actually think it's a preference. They're more comfortable living in this space of not knowing and, like, just being unsure than claiming something and being okay for it to evolve beyond that, because they're actually not going to get further along until they make a choice and allow that information to inform what comes next. It's never going to be a misstep because it's always going to be leading you towards where you're meant to go, but that can never happen if you don't start.
This is so good. It reminds me of it's almost like a metaphor too for how you show up. So for us, Mel and I can make big decisions with fairly fairly good ease and speed. Like our house, we fully renovated from top to bottom, like absolute shell in a month and a half, which
Yep.
means we had to make design decisions in like hours.
Yeah.
And it was in the lockdown, so like we can do big things very quickly and easier than most. However, small things. A shower curtain is an absolute nightmare for us to pick out. It took us months. We showered with no shower curtain because we couldn't make a
I
decision.
remember building it.
You just that
Yeah.
and and I can see how this is also a metaphor for us. Like Mel and I can make very big life decisions with I would say more ease and confidence than a lot of people, just because we've had a lot of practice doing that. And I can see that we also get hung up
In the
on
nitty gritty.
of like the dumbest decision that makes no like difference,
Ugh.
and we can like get hung up on that. So do you notice that for some of your clients or even yourself with kind of
Yeah.
the parallels?
Yeah, I do. And you know what? Honestly, sometimes it's not that I feel like a hypocrite. I think that's too strong of a word. And perhaps this is even reasonable and expected, but I find it so much easier to help other people than myself because I'm just a little bit further removed. I'm not dealing with my own stuff that I need to work through that is blocking me because I can see it so objectively. But by default, I have a subjective lens when it comes to myself. And as much as I try to be objective, are not always successful.
I think that's
Yeah.
normal for sure.
Yeah, and so I like, one question that I often find myself asking when it comes to not avoiding, but just having an aversion to making a decision on something relatively small, especially when it's changeable, is why does this feel so big for you? Or what's the worst that could happen? So I've been helping my parents have gone through a big kitchen reno and 2 bathroom renos, and I've been helping them throughout the process, and it has not been seamless for, a few reasons, but they have been paralyzed by paint color choice.
Yeah.
And most people choose paint color first, which is completely the wrong order to do things because paint is meant to link all of the different elements of your home. And if you're starting with it, then there's a good chance that the other selections you're making don't actually fit the paint color. And so they hadn't decided on their decorating yet, but their tile was installed, their vanity was chosen, but it wasn't installed yet, and they're trying to, like, match this paint color to their tile, and they did all of the things I recommend a person doesn't do when sampling paint, which is, like, you have to do it with a white surface behind it, do not put a whole bunch of swatches on the wall, do not make those swatches small, like, it's just gonna overwhelm you and they had probably like 8 different colors. And I'm like trying to help them narrow it down. And to me, it was like the initial paint color I had recommended to them, and it came to me very quickly. That wasn't even one of the samples they picked. I'm like, why aren't you starting with this? It is what they ended up going with, ironically. But all of this backstory to say, and I kept saying this to them, but I don't think they were able to hear it at that point of overwhelm.
Mm.
Paint is a really cheap change. Like,
Yes.
sure, a pan of paint is $100. That might seem like a big amount. In the whole scheme of things, it's not. And if it's not the right choice, then I would rather be making a $100 mistake than a $1,000 mistake because you chose the wrong tile. So just pick it.
Yeah.
And if it truly is wrong, then be okay with changing it.
Yeah.
Same with the shower curtain that you guys struggled with.
I think what you just said, be okay. Yeah, it's mostly me. Be okay with changing it. I think that is huge, huge. And that I think that's part of what your superpower is that I think you're really flexible in how you perceive change. I'm thinking of because I know you help with art and really expression and expression in many different ways. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it even is just in your art. I think it's how you live, it's how you speak, it's how you even help me with bringing mine out through written word. But I'm thinking of our neighbor. I really hope she's listening to this because she would absolutely love that I'm sharing this. And they're all are you'll know what
Oh,
what
I
you're
know the
sharing.
one you're talking about.
So they're having a girls' weekend
Sup, girl?
and they're all very, I would say, high level in
Oh, yeah.
their careers
This is the
and
best.
typical A type personalities that I love being in control. Some from finance, like you get the idea, the vibe. And they were following a video of like a painting of you do like Bob Ross. I think it was like a Bob Ross painting.
Like where you follow it and they tell you what color, when to do it, how to
Like
do the strokes. Like
the amount of meltdowns that happened during that process.
I was sitting there watching it being like, this is better than TV right now.
It's
Like,
like
this is amazing.
And it's like losing the control, having to like, it's going too fast. It's like, this isn't good. It's like seeing these women who are very high performing. And in fairness, I think if I was in their seat too, I think I probably would have been feeling the exact same way. So I think there is this change piece, but I think it's also like being okay with the flow and the expression and letting go of
And how it
the-
turns out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many things that are coming up for me in what you've just said. And I mean, I personally have a strong bias towards the recreation of pieces because like that's part of my artistic origin story is how like I started because I was trying to recreate a piece and it was just truly abysmal. And it wasn't until I acknowledged or recognized that it's because I was trying to recreate something that it wasn't my voice.
Mm.
And so for myself and my own artistic practice, but also through art workshops that I lead, I'm encouraging people to step into their own, like experience that discomfort of not knowing, of not having specific direction, of not trying to create a finished end product, because this process is quite literally about the process, finding the journey and responding to what comes up. And so, just in what you're describing, where they are following this prescribed process with an end result in mind, yeah, it's not surprising to me at all that they would get like hung up on doing it perfectly or wanting to slow down to go back, because the the creative space to be doing that piece of art doesn't really allow or accommodate for freestyle.
Yeah.
Yes, and then they realized, like, halfway through that they were actually using the wrong paint color,
So funny.
and I think that's
It's the
part
best.
of what you're saying. It's like there's not as much permission to play and create. But as you were sharing that, it's like not knowing. I think even for me, I'm like, but what is it gonna look like? What is and I think that's part of the point. It's like that's maybe not as important as the process and the approach that you take to creating.
Yeah. Well, yes. So if you were to think about your future 10 years from now, do you know exactly where you're going to be?
I have an idea.
Okay. Well, you have an idea. That's
How I'm
a
gonna get
starting
there?
point.
Not a fucking
I
clue.
hope it's it. Is that what you're thinking?
But I'm okay to that. With
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
whether you have an idea or you don't know at all, like that's kind of the point. Like having an idea, it's still not concrete. You don't know how it actually might shift once you get it. Like you're thinking about a certain aspect of it, but there's so many details to what real life actually is that I think they're quite impossible to imagine until you're living it. So you're taking action on a general idea, but like you said, Mel, you don't know how you're going to get there. You're just figuring it out. So,
but I also have full-time faith in that I will get there.
yeah. And that's important too. And that comes back to building up the internal self-trust of stepping into what feels uncomfortable or unknown and doing it for the learning, for the information gathering so that you can discern and figure out like, okay, well, now what? You
Yeah.
can't do that if you're just paralyzed by not knowing.
Go so this is so good. I wanna ask you a question. We've watched you for, maybe 3 years.
At least I wanna say at least 3 years, yeah.
3 years now. Continuously challenge yourself and to put yourself in situations where you're like, "I feel like I don't belong on a stage." We watched you speak on a stage in front of 200 people,
And you rocked it.
and you fucking rocked it. And where does your mindset go being like, "I'm gonna do that." Even though I've never spoken on a stage before, I don't have a speech right now. Like, I work in corporate, I'm an artist, like, who wants to hear from me? Like, how do you continuously put yourself in situations where you're outside your comfort zone?
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking about this the other day because I was curious about it myself. And really, it comes down to like, I have no business doing what I'm doing. Whether it's like, I recently renovated my powder room and I did the plumbing. I was so intimidated by that. I have no business doing that. I'm not trained. I know nothing. I was
Yeah.
highly reliant on YouTube. I have no business being an artist. I'm not self trained. Like, there's all of these reasons why we can convince ourselves not to do things.
Yeah.
And really, when it comes down to it for me, I just have big desires for myself. I have an incredibly strong aversion to being limited and restricted with other people telling me what I can or can't do. And so that is fuel for me because I'm like, no, I'm going to be bigger than what you're telling me is possible. And so I see people who have spoken on stage with no experience at one point. I've seen artists who have built multi six figure careers with no training. And so I've just gotten this mindset of, well, if they can, then why can't I? It's clearly possible, so it can be possible for me too. And knowing that, like, so there's kind of two different stages that you can be at. There's the knowing it, but not truly believing it. So you still long for it, or you think about it and kind of kick the can down the road and not take any action. And that's where the intentional stepping into discomfort comes in for me, because I have done enough uncomfortable things even before there was intention behind it, where I've experienced enough benefit from doing it that I realize, okay, I'm just going to become a bigger, better version of myself by doing what I'm afraid to. And the more that you do uncomfortable things, the more comfortable you get experiencing that discomfort. So eventually, like, it's never truly enjoyable feeling uncomfortable, but eventually that discomfort just kind of becomes a quiet friend that you can choose to hold hands with and move forward with, instead of trying to shut the door on them, hoping that you can still go be the biggest, best version of yourself and not bring the discomfort along.
Yeah.
I I totally agree, and I think we kinda live in that same approach, but almost the words that come to me for you, it's like almost like a why not? Why not do this? Or why not try that? And I truly think that why not for anything? So, like, if you can see it in someone else, like, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I love how that person speaks," or "I love how this person shows up in their business," or "how they show up with their family." It's like, if you can see it in someone else, you also have it in yourself.
Mhm.
And that's something that had always kind of stuck with us, and it's like, why not? You're right, it's like, who cares if you never spoke on a stage? It was like, you rocked it. Well, 1, you did, but I think to me, what success is more so than a lot of, like, the repetitions and stuff, it's actually just commitment to self, having the commitment to show up and be like, "I'm just gonna do my best in whatever it is that is on my heart," and it's like, if you continuously do that, like, that is, I think, where the real magic happens.
And to be honest, it's inspiring watching people do that.
It is. I can't think of a more inspiring thing. I'm sure I could if I really thought about it, but that is one of the most inspiring things.
Like, there were professional speakers who that is their job. They only speak, who were on the same stage as you. And yeah, they had a good message. They did. But I think for me, I enjoyed watching you speak more than them, because to them it was a job. And to you, it was an experience. It was a new challenge. And you could feel that. That like emanated off of you. The whole audience felt it. And
Mhm.
for me, watching that was really inspiring.
I love that you're identifying this, because it's such a great point to illustrate the importance of doing things for information.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know truly why I was on that stage. I have no, at the time, I know it now.
Yeah.
I have never been particularly comfortable speaking publicly. I think there's few people in this world of 7 billion that are. And it was out of character for who I typically am, but I just had this desire to put my name out there to be on this stage, and it got accepted, and so next thing I know, okay, I'm doing it. I wasn't necessarily expecting it, I wanted to go for the opportunity, and then I responded to what that meant next when I got it, and as a result of being up there, even though it was so out of character for who I had been, it changed something in me. It gave me information I couldn't possibly have had without doing that experience, to realize, holy crap, I have a message I really believe in. And the feedback I got as a result showed me that there are people who need to hear it. It built the belief in myself going through that whole process that I can do it, and I can do it better, because, like, that was my first time.
Yeah.
And I say this because it illustrates the point of doing things to get information. I would not be on the path I'm on now if I hadn't have done it, if I had have just accepted that who I have been is always going to be who I will be.
It was really cool too because not only and I think this is where you're going with it too, it's so much bigger than just the talk itself,
Yeah.
being on the stage, it's the whole process because you not only did you create the talk, you hosted
Oh, yeah.
your neighbors, which was just so cute. You had, like, your elderly neighbors, you just had, like, people in the community, you're like, "Come hear my talk," as part of the practice, and I think this is something that if you see this in sports, you see this in the Olympics, you see
Yeah.
this in high level people who are doing things very well. There is a shit ton of practice and preparation and experimenting that went behind it that a lot of people don't realize. And I think that is part of what I think you're really good at, but you do it from a space of also possibilities, permission,
Yeah.
doing things maybe differently, and I can even think of this in your corporate setting where it's like you're like, typically everyone's wearing black, they're wearing the same thing, they're doing the same thing. You're like, "Why not put a pop of color on,
Yeah.
use some different font, and show up and fully express myself?"
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because if you truly want to achieve something different for yourself, whether that's different than what you currently have or different than what you see yourself surrounded by, you need to do things differently. And so if all the executives are wearing dark colors, but the message that's being communicated is we need to do things differently, well, your wardrobe choice isn't necessarily going to change business results, but it starts with creating alignment. And the more that you choose in the small little pieces of your day to do things in aligned to the bigger message or the bigger goal that you're working towards, the more seamless and easy it's going to feel because you're not trying to balance two different versions of yourself. There's no friction between what you're saying you want and what you're doing.
Mm.
And that's so important. And I think like it's embodiment. So even like just going back to the speaking example, it was important to me to be prepared, but I also knew I wanted to give a certain experience. And to give that experience, I needed to know my message well enough to embody the energy behind the message and not just speak the words. And so I think a lot of people, when there's something that they want and they now have that opportunity, the embodiment to show up and deliver isn't prepared enough. And I don't mean like they aren't prepared enough. They just haven't connected enough to the energy behind the experience they want to give. And so that almost dilutes the impact, or it can at least.
Mhm.
It's like an actor. It's like you can know your lines. That's one thing. But can you actually then embody the character in which you need to show up
And
in?
the words, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can tell you, like, drama class was paralyzing to me.
Absolutely. I hated it.
Just the worst. Yeah. So, yeah, like, it's a testament to getting up on stage. It's like,
Yeah.
so not what I would actively choose for myself, but I would now.
Well, I'm grateful you did.
Thank you.
What is fun for you right now?
Mm. Oh man, so many things. But what I'm really loving is mood board creation. So I mentioned I had just redid my powder room, and it was the saddest space that I had started to change when I first moved in. Like when I moved in 3 years ago, and every wall in the house was like this mushroom color. Very dated, very dark, so not me. And so I painted all of the walls on the main floor. And I started to paint the powder room white, not because I necessarily planned to keep it that color. I just wanted something fresh and brighter as a starting point to get rid of the old color. And I have photos actually, like even from a couple weeks ago, where and it's 3 years old, where I had started cutting the edges, applying the paint to the corners of the white, and I realized almost right away that it was wrong for the space, and so I just left it like that, and so I don't this isn't actually particularly relevant, this is just part of my, like, my transformation process of the powder room that I love to talk about. But anyways, it's so different now. And so um why I love the mood boards is because they are just really fun ways to get use as a creative outlet for myself that doesn't take as much time as like committing to a painting and starting a start to end process for a piece of art, but also to show other people through a digital image just different things that they can do that can inspire and bring to life a concept for a room. And so I played with so many mood boards for my powder room. And eventually I was just like, okay, for this particular space, and I'm feeling kind of indecisive because it could go so many different ways, I'm just going to start and I'm going to respond. So the mood board was a source of inspiration, but it also evolved. And now I'm just doing them for fun to share with people and to give them like little shots of color in their
Ah,
in their life to inspire them of what's possible in their own space. So
so
I love
yeah.
that.
Where can people follow along, learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah. So I have my website, which is katerogerscreations.com, and that is the same for LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm at Kate Rogers Creations. And yeah, you can find me in either one of those three spots on my website. I have all of my art up there, and I have some background on the services that I offer as well. And I will be launching officially some e-design packages and color consults to help people with their space as well.
That's cool. We'll put all this in the show notes, but I would highly recommend taking you up on that offer because you actually helped us with our brand evolution. I know like we we consulted with you many different times.
Yeah.
And even the final pick, we're like, what does your 5-year-old self say?
Yeah.
And we kind of landed on the same thing. So yeah, you've been a huge part of our
Journey.
but you said something about like bringing color into life. Like I really do think that is what you do. You bring color into people's lives
Yeah.
in through energy in many different ways. My last question is if you could just leave one more message, could be a tangible tip, something from your heart that you want to share to their heart. Is there anything that comes up?
Mm. Yeah. What you desire is possible, and you don't need to know the way. You just need to take action in the general direction. So trust that and follow your heart sparks so that you can really create a life that lights you up because you want it. So go start, do it. I so believe that everybody can make that happen for themselves.
Amazing. Thank you
That's so
so much,
good.
Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Woohoo! So good.
Thanks for listening to WTF. Where's the fun?
We're Andrea and Mel, and we're so excited to be on this journey with you to see how fun it can get.
If today's episode brought a little bit more fun into your world, be sure to subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review.
And remember, life and business is so much better when you're following the fun. So let's have some fun.